Hello viewers, this is Ranjana ma'am. Yes, I'm back again and you are watching, yes, your channel and my channel. And this time, again, for 11, it is a prose piece. This is the only remaining prose piece of class 11, the Chinese statue. The remaining remaining ones I have already done. I remember the first three: Salvatore Fried's Quality, and then I have also done a gorilla in the guest room and Chinese statue. So these are the 5 you need for your class 11, and obviously they are also important for your class 12. So Chinese statue is written by one of the best contemporary writers of English, Jeffrey Archer. Yes, he is one of my favorite. I have a number of books in my library regarding Jeffrey Archer, with Jeffrey Archer as the author. So he is, yes, as I said, he is one of the most famous one, and as such, most of his books are bestsellers. So the Chinese statue is quite an interesting one, but at the same time, it is quite lengthy. So I won't be able to do it in one video. I will naturally split it as I always do. Even you all will get bored if I go on and on and on. So it's better I do half of it in one video and then you all wait for me to finish it in the next video. That would be a welcome respite. But anyway, the poem is interesting, the story is interesting, sorry. So many of you have told me, or rather many of my students also told me, that they didn't understand it when they read it first time. Honestly speaking, when I too read it for the first time, it seemed a bit confusing, because it must be one of the stories written in his initial days as author. I have read quite a few books of him, and they are all of them are very comprehensive. You can understand them very easily. So I had to also give a second reading to understand it better. Actually, the story goes back to the past and present. There is a little bit of fluctuation, past and present. So that is why it confused many of the students. Many of my students also, they found it confusing. Many of them said, ma'am, until you explained it, we really didn't get, we didn't really know what the story was about. It seemed so bizarre, so confusing. Anyway, so without wasting any more time, let's go back to it, and while we continue with it, yes, I'll do the explanations, but what is coming, you all know it. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please do and press the like button after the video ends. So for that, you will have to watch it till the end and then do press the like button. So the little Chinese statue was the next item to come under the auctioneer's hammer. So many times some of the heirlooms, when people are short of money, they sell their heirlooms, something which has been in the family or something, some antique piece, and they are sold at an auction. So the highest bidder gets it. So maybe first they start with, they show a particular thing, and then they start the auction with maybe 10 pounds, and then someone says 11 pounds, and another bidder says 12 pounds. In this way it continues. And finally, when no one goes higher than the given one, so the last bidder who goes to the highest, he gets the thing. That is what we call auction. So here, what was being auctioned? A Chinese statue. So lot 103, this was the number given to the Chinese statue. Lot 103 caused those quiet murmurings that always precede the sale of a masterpiece. That means in the hall where the auction was taking place, many people had come to see the auction and many had come to bid. there would be quite a few remarkable things to be sold. So when this lot number 3, that means 103, that means the Chinese statue, when its turn came, people started murmuring among themselves. Why? When does this type of murmuring happen? When a masterpiece is sold. That means those people who were present there, they considered it a masterpiece. The auctioneer's assistant held up the delicate piece of ivory for the packed audience to admire. While the auctioneer glanced around the room to be sure, he knew where the serious bidders were seated. So there were 2 people on the dais. One was the auctioneer and the other was his assistant. So he held up the thing to display it to the people who had gathered there, the buyers, so that they could have a nice glance of it, they could see it well. Whereas the auctioneer was looking around the room, trying to see who were the serious people. See, some of them, they come there just for the sake of it. They come for fun. Some of them, they come for mischief. They just raise the price, but they are not really inclined to buy. They are not interested in buying. They just come and someone says 12, they'll say 13 and then 14. In this way, they raise the price of the thing, but they don't really buy, and then they keep shut. So the auctioneer was searching with his eyes. He's an experienced man. And with his eyes, he was trying to search who is the real interested bidder among them. He knew the serious ones. I studied my catalogue and read the detailed description of the piece and what was known of its history. I don't think it's Jeffrey Archer. It is the narrator, let's assume. The statue had been purchased so I, or the narrator, he studies the history of the piece. What is the history? What is the background? Why is there a murmuring? Why do people consider a masterpiece? So the statue had been purchased in Halishuan in 1871. So the statue's, the person who is selling it, it had been in their family for more than 100 years. The person to whom this statue belongs, lot number 103, the Ming statue, little Chinese statue. So it had been bought by the family in 1871 and was referred to as what Sotheby's quaintly described as the property of a gentleman. So the name of the person who is selling it or who has put it up for auction is not disclosed. It is just said the property of a gentleman. He doesn't want to come in front. Usually meaning that some member of the aristocracy did not wish to admit that he was having to sell off one of the family heirlooms. So many times now it's a discredit that you are unable to keep something which had been in your family for such a long time. That means you are economically broke, and that is why most probably you are putting it up for auction. No one would want to part with a thing which has been in your family and which is a masterpiece unless you are hard pressed for money. And no one would like to admit that also, that I need money, especially if they are, if they belong to an aristocratic family. So that is why the property of a gentleman. I wondered if that was the case on this occasion and decided to do some research to discover what had caused the little Chinese statue to find its way into the auction rooms on that Thursday morning over 100 years later. So in 1871, it had been purchased from China, and from China it had been purchased by an Englishman, and it had been in his family. So what really happened that 100 years later it was put up for auction? So the narrator tried to do some serious research on it to know the cause. Sir Alexander Heathcote, now we are going back to the past, 1871, when this statue was bought. So who bought it? So as if we are shifting to 1871. In the past we are going. Sir Alexander Heathcote, as well as being a gentleman, was an exact man, perfect man. He was exactly 6'3" and a quarter inches tall, quite tall. rose at 7 o'clock every morning, joined his wife at breakfast to eat one boiled egg cooked for precisely 4 minutes, 2 pieces of toast with 1 spoonful of Cooper's marmalade, and drink 1 cup of China tea. He would then take a hackney carriage from his home in Cadogan Gardens at exactly 8:20 and arrive at the Foreign Office at promptly 8:59, returning home again on the stroke of 6 o'clock. See, so the man who is being described is a very important man. Why? Because it is this man who had bought the Chinese statue from China and had brought it to England. And Alexander Heathcote, he was a perfect gentleman working in a Foreign Office and serving the Queen. Sir Alexander had been exact from an early age. So from an early age only, he had led a very routine life, exact life, regular life, as became the only son of a general. His father was a general, so it was very natural that he should be very perfect regarding time and in his manners and habits. Military people are very disciplined, army men. So he grew up with an army man as his father, a general. But unlike his father, he chose to serve his queen in the diplomatic service, another exacting calling. So unlike his father, he chose to serve his queen in a different manner. He, like his father, did not join the army. He joined the foreign service. And in that way, he chose to serve the Queen of England. He progressed. So just see the steps of his progress, the ladder of his progress. He progressed from a shared desk at the Foreign Office in Whitehall to third secretary in Calcutta, to second secretary in Vienna, to first secretary in Rome, to deputy ambassador in Washington, and finally to minister in Peking. So just see his rise. First he shared a desk in the Foreign Office. Then he got a promotion and was transferred to Kolkata. That time it was called Calcutta. And then another promotion takes him to Vienna as the second secretary. The next promotion is to Rome as the first secretary. Then he is the deputy ambassador in Washington. And finally, he is sent as an ambassador. Minister here means ambassador, representing the country, the highest. Those in India, those who qualify for the UPSC exams and they are the top rankers, they get in the foreign service and they become the ambassadors representing the country in foreign countries. So finally, where did he go as an ambassador? Peking, it's written in your book, but nowadays you must be aware we don't say Peking. We don't write it, that's not the spelling. Nowadays it's written Beijing, Beijing. Maybe the pronunciation is same, but we'll read what is in the book. He was delighted when Mr. Gladstone was the Prime Minister, invited him to represent the government in China, as he had for some considerable time taken more than an amateur interest in the art of the Ming dynasty. So the Ming dynasty had ruled China for quite some time in a very glorious manner. So Sir Alexander Heathcote was a keen lover of art and architecture and also Chinese traditions and everything. So it was as if a blessing for him that he got his posting in China. Why? Because just before he had got, it was just coincidence that he had been taking a lot of interest in the art and architecture and tradition of China, amateur interest, art of the Ming dynasty, and it was then that he was transferred as the ambassador to China. So it's like a blessing in disguise. He is very happy. The crowning appointment in his distinguished career would afford him what until then he would have considered impossible. Until then it was impossible for him to go to China and see the things which he have read. So an opportunity to observe in their natural habitat some of the great statues, paintings and drawings which he had previously been able to admire only in books. So earlier he would go to the library, or maybe he bought books regarding the Ming dynasty and read about their art and architecture. And not only that, he saw the pictures and enjoyed it. And now he would be able to go and see those very pictures in their natural houses. When Sir Alexander arrived in Peking after a journey by sea and land that took his party nearly 2 months, 1870s. So yes, it's very natural. It took him 2 months from England to come to China. He presented his seals patent to the Empress Zhu Si. That time China was ruled by an empress. And what's her name? Zhu Si. And a personal letter from her private reading from Queen Victoria. So who gave the letter? The letter was given by Queen Victoria to the Empress of China. So Sir Alexander took the letter and presented himself before the Empress of China. The Empress, dressed from head to toe in white and gold, received her new ambassador in the throne room of the imperial palace. She read the letter from the British monarch. Who's the British monarch referred to here? Queen Victoria. While Sir Alexander remained standing to attention. Her Imperial Highness revealed nothing. So what was written in the letter, she did not say anything. To the new minister, only wishing him a successful term of office in his appointment. She just says, good luck. All the best. Then she moved her lips slightly at the corners, which Sir Alexander judged correctly to mean that the audience had come to end. That means his visit was over, now he can depart. As he was conducted back through the great halls of the imperial palace by a mandarin in the long coat dress of black and gold, Sir Alexander walked as slowly as possible, taking in the magnificent collection of ivory and jade statues which were scattered casually around the building, much in the way Cellini and Michelangelo today lie stacked against each other in Florence. So, when he was being led out of the palace, on both sides of the passage, there were very nice, huge statues, Chinese statues. And so the Mandarin is a Chinese official of a high rank. So this Mandarin was leading him the way. And what was Sir Alexander doing? Yes, he was following, but very, very slowly, lingering as if. Why? Because he is trying to take as much of the flavor as if of the Chinese statue stacked on both sides. In the same way as you would find the statues of Michelangelo and Cellini in Florence. So they are lying there. To Sir Alexander, they have a different meaning, a different fascination. But for people who visit it day in and day out, they seem to be so ordinary. Nothing special. But to him, as his ministerial appointment was for only 3 years, as if 3 years was not enough for him, he would have been happy if it had been for many more years. So only 3 years he feels. So what did he do? 3 years he has been sent to Peking for 3 years only. So what does he do? Sir Alexander took no leave, but preferred to use his time to put the embassy behind him and travel on horseback into the outlying districts to learn more about the country and its people. So as if it seemed he was obsessed with China and its art, architecture, culture. So he would go, he wouldn't take leave to go back to England, take maybe 1 month's leave and then come back. No, so long as I have my appointment, only 3 years, I will not waste even a single day. So on his holidays or when he had no work, he would go and visit the districts close by to learn more about the country and its people. On these trips, he was always accompanied by a Mandarin from the palace staff. Yeah, so the palace staff would provide him with a Mandarin, and it would serve two purposes. He would be a guide as well as an interpreter. Why interpreter? Because he did not know the Chinese language. So if he had to speak to one of the natives, he needed someone who knew English as well as Chinese. So these Mandarin, these were doing the job of an interpreter and guide. On one such journey, passing through the muddy streets of a small village with but a few houses called Halishuan, a distance of some 50 miles from Peking, Sir Alexander chanced upon an old craftsman's working place. So a workshop of an old Chinese craftsman. So while he was passing, he suddenly comes across the workshop of an old Chinese craftsman. Where? In Halishuan. Leaving his servants, the minister dismounted from his horse. So he got down from his horse and entered the ramshackle wooden workshop to admire the delicate pieces of ivory and jade that shelved from floor to ceiling. So this craftsman had been working really well, because the ceiling, from the floor to the ceiling, it was stacked with statues. Although modern, the pieces were superbly executed by an experienced craftsman. And the minister entered the little hut with the thought of acquiring a small memento of his journey. So he thought, why don't I buy something from here? This will be a memento. So when we go to different places, don't we buy something in remembrance of that place? Souvenir. So once in the shop, he could hardly move in any direction for fear of knocking something over. That means it was so congested, and not only that, it was not built for a tall man like him, and it was also stacked with statues. So he was afraid he might knock something down. The building had not been designed for a 6'3" and a quarter visitor. Yeah, it was, and Chinese people now, they are short of height, so it was not designed for the short, tall people like him. Sir Alexander stood still and enthralled. He's charmed, mesmerized, taking in the fine scented jasmine smell that hung in the air. An old craftsman bustled forward in a long blue coolie robe and flat black hat to greet him. So the craftsman, he's an old man, and he comes hastily to greet this giant. A jet black plaited pigtail fell down his back. So many of the Chinese people now, they have a ponytail, males, ponytail. He bowed very low and then looked up at the giant from England. Who's the giant from England? Sir Alexander Heathcote. The minister returned the bow. It's a bow actually. I thought it was bow. No, bow. Bowing is when you bend. Earlier now, we had to bow before our teachers when we said good morning, miss, or good morning, ma'am. Nowadays, though, those traditions are out. I don't know whether you all do it. Forget it. So, and Chinese people, Japanese people, they bow a lot. They'll bow, bend half of their bodies. So the minister returned the bow while the Mandarin explained who Sir Alexander was and his desire to be allowed to look at the work of the craftsman. So the Mandarin goes and tells this man, see, he's the ambassador from England and he wants to have a look at your workshop, at the things. He's very interested in Chinese lifestyle, Chinese art, architecture. The old man was nodding his head in agreement even before the Mandarin had come to the end of his request. For over an hour, the minister sighed and chuckled. Chuckled is when you laugh silently, as he studied many of the pieces with admiration, and finally returned to the old man to praise his skill. You are a master craftsman, he tells most probably. So he admires all the work done by this man. The craftsman bowed once again, and his shy smile revealed no teeth, but only genuine pleasure at Sir Alexander's compliments. So most probably this man was so old that his teeth were missing. So when he smiled, his teeth were not seen. Only genuine pleasure was noticed. Pointing a finger to the back of the shop, he beckoned the two important visitors to follow him. So he tells, come with me to the back of the shop. They did so and entered a veritable Aladdin's cave with row upon row of beautiful miniature emperors, small emperors, the emperors who had ruled China. So small statues of them and classical figures. The minister could have happily settled down in the orgy of ivory for at least a week. There were so many, he could have very happily stayed there for one week to observe all these things very minutely. Sir Alexander and the craftsman chatted away to each other through the interpreter, and the minister's love and knowledge of the Ming dynasty was soon revealed. So while talking, the craftsman came to know that the minister was as if in love with the Ming dynasty. He had become an ardent fan of the Ming dynasty. The little craftsman's face lit up with this discovery, and he turned to the Mandarin and in a hushed voice made a request. So this craftsman's face brightens up and he tells the Mandarin something and he says, "Come with me." The Mandarin nodded in agreement and translated, "I have, Your Excellency, a piece of Ming myself that you might care to see." So this is not the Mandarin saying, he's just translating to the ambassador what the craftsman had said, that he has in his possession also a Ming statue. A statue that has been in my family for over 7 generations. I should be honored. Yeah, I should be honored if you want to show it to me. "It is I who should be honored, Your Excellency," said the little man, who thereupon scampered out of the back door. He walks very fast out of the back door, nearly falling over a stray dog. In his haste, he nearly tumbled over a dog that was sitting, and on to an old peasant house a few yards behind the workshop. Behind the workshop, at a small distance, there was an old house. So he went there. This must be his temporary house where he stays. The minister and the Mandarin remained in the back room, for Sir Alexander knew the old man would never have considered inviting an honored guest into his humble home until they had known each other for many years. So Sir Alexander is very well aware of the Chinese traditions and their rules and regulations. So he knows that I shouldn't follow him because he wouldn't invite me unless he knows me for a long time. So unless you know someone for a long time, you don't invite that person to your house. And then another clause, and only then after he had been invited to Sir Alexander's home. So you invite the visitor only after he has invited you to his house. A few minutes passed before the little blue figure came trotting back, pigtail bouncing up and down on his shoulders. So his pigtail fluttering up and down. He was now clinging on to something that, from the way he held it close to his chest, had to be a treasure. So he's bringing something closely clinging to his chest, and it seems it must be a treasure. Otherwise, you won't press it fast to yourself. The craftsman passed the piece over to the minister for study. "See, sir, it is here." So what does the minister see? Sir Alexander's mouth opened wide, and he could not hide his excitement. The little statue, no more than 6 inches in height, was of Emperor Kung of the Ming dynasty, and as fine an example of Ming as the minister had seen. Sir Alexander felt confident that the maker was the great Pen Q. So Pen Q, in the time of Emperor Kung, was a very noted sculptor, very noted craftsman. And Sir Alexander is confident that no one else but Pen Q must have made this statue of Emperor Kung, who had been patronized by the emperor, so that the date must have been around the turn of 15th century. So Sir Alexander has done such a thorough study that he knows that Emperor Kung ruled during the 15th century. So the statue must be of that time. The statue's only blemish, only drawback, was that the ivory base, that means the platform, the statue has to have a platform now on which it will be put, the pedestal, on which such pieces usually rest, was missing. So the platform or the pedestal on which the statue was put, that portion is not there. And a small stick protruding from the bottom of the imperial robe. So small stick was coming visible from the imperial dress. But in the eyes of Sir Alexander, nothing could detract from its overall beauty. So even if the platform was missing, it was beautiful, according to Sir Alexander. Although the craftsman's lip did not move, His eyes glowed with the pleasure his guest evinced as he studied the ivory emperor. So the craftsman's lips also did not move. Why? He is looking in a very pleased manner. Very pleased. Why? Because the guest to whom he has given, he is observing it in such a, what should we say, in such a wondrous manner. He is as if full of praise. What a statue, what a statue. So I'll stop this video here, and the next I'll do in my second video. So wait for the second part to come, because if I do it, as I have already said, if I do it at a stretch, even y'all will be bored and even I will be. I always take at least 2 to 3 classes. So for y'all, I'll take 2 videos. So in the meantime, read it, and your comments are welcome. For the time being, let me bid you goodbye, and yes, have a good time.